Hi, hello, welcome back to another episode of The Whole Being. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, and I mean, you can see my face, but hear from my countenance that I am feeling 1,000 times better. I've gotten my energy back. I'm no longer in pain. I have no idea what it was I was sick from. I should probably see an actual physician to find out what happened. But I hope you're doing well. It is episode 5 of The Whole Being. And I gave myself a little clap, a little pat on the back for making it this far. Not that I didn't think I would, but I tend to overextend myself and take on more than I can actually do. So this is one of the first times in a long time that I'm actually pacing myself and being more intentional with choosing the things that I want to do and making sure that I'm not taking on too many things at once. And the podcast is top priority for me. I really want to keep this going, and I've been trying to find ways or working around ways to consistently put myself in spaces and situations where I'm able to show up in a, not a bare minimum type of way per se, but in a way that I make things so low cost in terms of the amount of energy I'm putting into this, make things informal enough that I will be comfortable to show up and share what is on my mind and be as helpful as possible without there being too many barriers, like how do I look, how do I sound, how do I feel. I'm trying to minimize a lot of distractions and excuses that in the past have made me show up inconsistently. And so far so good. I think I am on a good path. I'm not as nervous when I'm coming to sit behind the mic anymore, which is good, which is really, really good. I'm not overthinking things. I'm not trying to sit behind the mic and say the smartest things or sound like the most inspirational. I just want to show up for myself and for you in the easiest, most human way possible that I can, which might not sound like a lot, but for me, it is a lot. Taking the walls down and simply showing up is hard for me. I am a huge perfectionist, which I always think is an ironic thing to say because nothing I make is ever perfect anyway. So it's a very weird self-roasting thing to say you're a perfectionist, because being a perfectionist prevents you from even creating anything to begin with, which means you will almost never create anything close to perfect. And I don't know, weird cycle. But that is not the topic for today's episode. In today's episode, I want to talk about legacy. I want to talk about the word legacy, what it means to leave a legacy. I've been thinking about this for a while because I came across a video on TikTok, a video of another podcast actually, where they're having a conversation talking about legacy, specifically with how it relates to children. Because I don't know if you are as chronically online as I am, then you've probably come across a lot of these conversations that have been happening lately with the rise in, I don't even think there's a particular rise in trend of women choosing to go child free, but I think there are more women choosing to make that path known, and they're not hiding in the shadows anymore, but choosing to be child free is becoming a real life option, and people are running scared, and it's sparking a bunch of conversations, and I guess I've seen and interacted with enough of that content that the internet, specifically TikTok, the algorithm has chosen to always show me those conversations, as annoying as they may be, because after all, that is how our algorithms work. But this particular conversation, though, we're talking specifically about children and how it relates to a legacy, to leaving a legacy. And the guy predictably thought it was an inherently selfish decision to choose to not have children. And his was like, if you're choosing not to have children, how are you going to pass on your legacy? And his co-host was very unrelentless in letting him have it and explaining to him how it is actually an inherently selfish choice to choose to have a child. Nothing in that decision is actually for this being that has no choice in whether they choose to exist or not. It is an action, it is a choice that you make for yourself. It has nothing to do with the child that you're making. That in itself is, it's a very weird premise to think that it is selfless to bear someone, and most of all to bear them because you want them to carry on this thing that you think is so great, right? And I thought she really left no stone unturned in explaining the faulty logic in that assumption that I'm so great. I'm going to give birth to this person that will be an extension of me, and she was coming from even the financial angle, the point of like living generational wealth and everything and things for your children. Like some of you don't even have 2 pennies to rub together and you want to birth children because you think there's something so great about you that this person will come and carry on. Not only is it unfair because you're setting the person up with unrealistic expectations already, because when you birth a child, you don't even know who that child is going to grow up to be or what choices they would want to make for themselves, which is what I consider to be inherently wrong in these conversations about giving birth to a child and having them be your legacy. Nobody, including the person that you birth, is an extension of you, and expecting that is going to happen is like, it makes me feel icky on so many different levels. But that is not even what I wanted to talk about today. I specifically want to talk about the legacy of being. That is what I think our legacy is. I don't think your legacy is the child that you birth. I don't think your legacy is the amount of money that you make, that you leave behind. It's a very faulty premise to me, because I always think about all the great people that we know: Nelson Mandela, Michael Jackson, Harriet Tubman, great people that made great names for themselves, whose parents and grandparents we don't even know. It doesn't reach that far. And as a matter of fact, we don't even know of their children, like the people that they left behind. So whenever those conversations are being had and people are talking about leaving your name behind, leaving a person behind, I'm like, that makes no sense. I heard a girl say in the comment section of that video, because people are rough on the internet, I read a girl say, some of you out here don't even know that your children are going to come out and be crackheads. And that made me laugh so hard, because but I think her point was, who's to say that the person that you birth is going to quote unquote carry a good name forward? Like, you can't predict any of these things. But whether you're famous or not, or you leave behind something great, something, whether it's a name or something with monetary value, what I think is a true legacy is who you are, the experience that you have here. And I want to talk about it in a more interpersonal way, in the ways that I truly believe that you can leave a legacy, or if that is even something that is important to think about at all as you're existing, right? The legacy of being is what is the most important. Besides the fact that the conversation is almost often skewed in a way that there's always a huge emphasis placed on, like I said, the monetary aspect and the generational wealth conversation when it comes to leaving a legacy. But there are also many different ways that you can leave a legacy. There's a legacy of knowledge and wisdom and experiences that are passed on from generations to generations. And I think sometimes people forget that it's not even in one lineage, right? There are so many different ways in which lines connect that have nothing to do with the person that you birth. So when we're having the conversation about leaving behind a legacy, whether it is you yourself as a person and the impact that you have on people that are not of your bloodline, there are lots of different things to consider. You can leave behind, the legacy of kindness and empathy, qualities that actually build up the character of a person that can be passed on from generation. And in thinking about it, I specifically wanted to focus on the very subtle ways in which these things happen, because you can't consider the legacy of your being without thinking about the impact that you have on others, or how you influence others while you're here, loving others while you're here on this earth. There is a cynical part of me, although I don't even think that part of me is cynical. I think it is just the really realistic part of me that is very, very well aware. I'm very acutely aware, like it's on the forefront of my mind, how short our time here is and how eventually everyone that we know, including ourselves, will someday not be here. You're not going to win in a race against time. And when you're asking yourself the question what your legacy is, and you're thinking about the things that you leave behind, are you sure that you're taking into account the things that you can't even see? How exactly are you measuring the impact that you have? Because I can guarantee that there are many different ways in which you have impacted people that you're not taking into account, or that you just don't consider as important because you've been told or taught to calculate your importance and your value and the impact that you have on others by very quote unquote tangible things. But a lot of the ways in which your presence makes a difference are things that are intangible. There are things that you have to know, but there aren't things that you can account for physically in a way that you can show to other people that this is my legacy? So when you don't try to answer those questions, and when you don't try to measure life by your own standards, by your own ideals, by your own values, you will find yourself reaching, as we often see people do in our society, for things that they think can't be measured. Because from what I see, no one wants to leave a legacy more than the man that has accomplished nothing. They talk about it so much. I'm like, bruh, like it's really not that serious. If you are actually focused on something in your life, you will not be expecting a full human being birthed with their own values, with their own reason for being. You will not be living expecting them to come and carry on a name that has barely accomplished anything, But when you are so focused on nailing down your entire being and your entire existence to what you have accomplished, you will find yourself latching on to all sorts of things, including people, including children, as extensions of you, i.e. your legacy. And there's nothing wrong with striving for accomplishment. There's nothing wrong with wanting to leave something, making sure that your name is known for something after you're gone. It is, in some ways, it's a noble pursuit, but it is not all that your existence has to be wrapped up in being. You definitely don't have to go as far as to make it everybody else's problem, especially the problem of the unborn. If you want to know what kind of legacy you're leaving behind, take some time to look at the impact that you have on the people around you, keeping at the back of your mind that you won't ever fully even know the amount of impact you've had around you, all the different people that you've come across. But a slightly simple way to go around that would be to look at the impact that other people have had around you in many small unknown ways, kind of intangible ways that mean so much to you, ways that sometimes when you even explain to the person, they've forgotten that they acted a certain way around you, or that they did something around you that stayed with you, that made an imprint in your life. And sometimes it is the most heartfelt things. Sometimes it is the silliest things that stay with you when you think about the people that leave a little bit of themselves with you. And these remnants of themselves that people live in you can range from people in your family line, in your bloodline, all the way to people that you only spent a couple of moments with. I like to think about the fact that I didn't know how to do long division for a long time, all through nursery and primary school. And when I eventually learned, I learned one afternoon with my grandfather, who I, for all intents and purposes, had no other kind of relationship with. And because of him, I learned how to do long division. And I can only do long division in the very specific, really old school way that he taught me to do it. I could never do it the way I was taught in class at that time. And he's gone, and he really didn't leave any monetary thing behind, but he left that with me. I taught that to another one of my siblings. I've taught that to multiple children over the years. But then I also think about one of my closest friends now, who I only met in 2016, just a couple of years ago, who makes a noise when she lifts something really light, something small like a comb or a phone or a book. But she makes a noise that makes it sound like she's carrying a huge couch up a flight of stairs or something. She makes that funny noise. And sometimes, even when I haven't spoken to her in a long time, I find myself doing it when I lift something really light. I make the same noise. And in my head, I'm like, I'm making the Risu noise again. And those things make me laugh. It's such a small, silly thing that she has left with me. And when I do it, my sister's like, where did you get that from? Like, I don't even know that I picked that up. It's all the little things that all still come together. I boil my pasta a certain way because I saw a friend do it once with oil, and I tried it and it tasted good. And that has stayed with me for years. I have a friend that I haven't spoken to for years who introduced me to the CW vampire genre show. And I went on to become obsessed with those shows. And those shows have shaped half of my personality for the past decade and a half. I think about how I curve the corner end of my L's because that's how my primary 3 school teacher did it. I am 30 years old now and I don't even know where he is. He is somewhere in his life, or hopefully still alive. But I curve my L the same way he used to do his. He taught me cursive, and I still curve my L's the same way he did his because I liked it so much and I picked it up. Or how in the early 2000s, my auntie would come back from university and she would listen to the Mariah Carey Butterfly album on repeat day after day after day, to the point where I started listening to it. And that album single-handedly shaped most of my vocabulary and made me start researching words and my obsession with how they're used in literature and in songs and in poetry. I also think about how in 2012, I sat with a man on a flight to Accra, And for most of the 2 hours that we were on that flight, he geeked out about J.R.R. Tolkien the entire time. And when I got back to school after that flight, I downloaded my first copy of Beowulf and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which sent me down a path for reading books that I had not been introduced to at that time. But I also think about how I learned the love of books from my mom, who at this point, we don't even read the same genre of books anymore, but that's where it came from. That was what sparked it. And how there are instances where when I say a mean thought to myself, I say something mean to myself, I hear myself scold myself for being mean to myself. But the voice that I hear in my head is not mine. I hear the voice of my friend from high school, who I haven't seen in over a decade, and I only talk to like 2 times a year. But I hear her say, don't be mean to my friend, because that's what she used to say to me. Don't be mean to my friend. Don't say that to my friend. So when I hear that voice in my head, I don't hear it in my voice. I hear it in her voice. That is something that she has left. That is a remnant of her that I will carry with me for years. I have carried with me for years. And when you start considering all the beautiful, all the small, but still great ways in which we rub off on each other and we leave little pieces of each other inside each other, you get to appreciate the nothingness of it all and how short our time is here, right? But at the same time, it's also one of the greatest things that you experience, knowing and being in a person's presence and knowing that you're just experiencing them for that short moment. But it's also why every time I hear those conversations being had, I think it is so egotistical. It is egotistical to think that you need to birth a version of yourself. You need to birth a mini me, as some people will say it, in order to feel like you have accomplished something. It is definitely an inherently selfish decision to have a child, but then to have a child for that purpose is almost diabolical, in my opinion. Because like I said before, it sets the child up for failure because they're born into a role that they, 1, didn't choose, but 2, might have no interest in even playing. I was telling my friend sometime last week, I'm like, it's always weird when I hear people talk about why they want to have children or how they want to have children, because they always say things that I don't think they know what it means subconsciously. Things like, I can't wait to have a daughter now, have someone that I can play dress up with, or I can do makeup with. I can't wait to have a son that I can watch football with. And I'm like, that person might not even like these things that you're doing. I don't think they're saying it to be malicious or anything, but I think we are living in a culture, in a society where people are not intentional enough about the reason why they choose to bring a living person into this world. And the conversations I had willy-nilly just seems like it's something to do when you're bored. And while those are conversations to be had, that is not the principal conversation to me. The main point of the conversation for me is making sure that you are aware of the life that you're living and you're being intentional about the life that you're living, that you're choosing to live. Choice is a very, very important word. And I think sometimes we forget that your life really just boils down to a series of choices and moments, or the choices that you're making in those moments. And if you find it difficult to measure the impact that you have in other people's lives, know that that is not something that you'll be able to measure in totality. All the people whose lives are changed by your presence or by the little things that you've done may never tell you, the ways that you have done that. There are some things that you just never know, but you also have to make sure that you're clear to yourself about how intangible sometimes your most impactful thing can be, and not get so bogged down when you don't have all the milestones and the landmarks that we are taught to value our existence by. A lot of those things don't last. A lot of those things are unpredictable. A lot of those things are things that are out of your control anyway. You can only control the ways in which you respond to your circumstances and the choices that you make and the kind of person that you choose to be to the people in your life. Those are the things that will live on. It is awesome and terrifying and beautiful to acknowledge and start recognizing that you are a puzzle of, pieces of all the different people that you have known and you have loved. And, unfortunately, even the people that have hurt you, whether it is people that you have briefly known and briefly loved, that doesn't really matter. Sometimes it is people that you know for a lifetime. Sometimes people that you have only briefly known and loved for a short period of time that have impacted you and the way you present yourself in the world, your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, how you perceive yourself. And depending on your life experiences, it can be painful, but it can also be beautiful to realize that you carry all those things with you wherever you go. And once you realize that, you start to see how important it is to learn the art of experiencing people while they are in your life, while you have them with you. And sometimes not like have them in the same physical space, but while they're in your life, because you don't really know how long that would be on your end or on their end. There's a quote by Yaa Gyasi that I think about often. I wasn't going to go through this entire episode without dropping a single quote, but yes, there's a quote by Yaa Gyasi legacy. And they said, I learned absolutely nothing, but some minor adjustments were made within me. A small, imperceptible shift occurred within me when I encountered wonder and awe. This is art. And I like to think about that with regards to how we experience people in our lives. I think when we're talking about legacy, you have to think about it also in terms of how you're experiencing people and how these people are experiencing you, the people that are in your lives for whatever period of time you have them. I saw a definition of legacy once where it says it means to plant seeds in a garden that you probably never get to see. And I love that so much because, like I've said one time, 1,000 times, we are all interconnected. Something just pops into my mind, and it is about my friend from uni who introduced me to Xena Warrior Princess. But I like to think that in our paths crossing, in me getting to know her, she planted the seeds that connected me to one of my best friends now, who is borderline obsessed with Xena Warrior Princess. So I like to think about how all those things are interconnected, and how one person comes into your life, plants a seed that you have no idea, it might not lead to anything. That's not the purpose of it. We're not experiencing each other always because we find each other useful. It is a privilege to just have had the opportunity to spend a time, however long that stretch may be, with someone. So when you're thinking about your legacy and the impact that you're leaving in the world, you have to take those things into account. I think it is egotistical for us to try to belittle all the small ways in which we impact each other's lives. It is ungrateful and short-sighted to negate or try to belittle all the remnants of people that they leave with you. But most of all, I also think it makes it easier for us to love lightly. There's an episode from the podcast on Fuck Your Brain where the title of the episode is Love Lightly, and oh my goodness, you have to listen to it. It's so good. But it's how, to practice the art of loving without any performance on your end, or expecting the person that you're sharing space and time with to be putting on a performance of you. After a while, those things get exhausting anyway. And I think the amount of performance that you're doing in a relationship is usually a good thermometer for measuring, I don't want to say the health of the relationship, but the level of intimacy in the relationship, right? But there's some aspect of knowing that, this person is in my life, and in whatever capacity, if I love them and I love being in their presence, and I have to recognize that I only get to experience them for a short while in all the different forms that they take. And it could be that the time that you have this person is a moment, just a couple of hours, weeks, months, years, and sometimes an entire lifetime. But all in all, our individual effort and our individual experiences contribute to the entire collective, especially the people that are in your circle, in your world. And you won't always see it, so you have to sometimes go looking for it. You have to be introspective at finding the ways that you love how a person exists in your life, and being grateful for it, and accepting that sometimes it is just what it is. It won't go past anything. But sometimes those little things are the legacy that they've left behind in you. You are a part of their story, and now they are part of your story. And like I said, this in no way negates the importance of, passing things down through bloodlines, because I still find it fascinating that I was in my mother while my mother was in my grandmother. There is something beautiful about it, sure, but that is not all life is. And if your story is one that isn't going to be told through a family tree, and how much you're able to extend that family tree, that's okay too. Neither is more important, more significant than the other. Keep in mind that your time here is finite, but in many ways you are very immortal. You will live on. There are parts of you that will go on to become something in multiple different forms. So don't discount your existence, but at the same time, don't be so self-aggrandizing. I don't even know what that word is. Aggrandizing? That you think the best way to make an impact in this world is to birth someone and project your feelings of what life should be onto them. That does not have to be your legacy. That is not all that you're meant to do here. It's not what you're meant to do here at all. Your presence has purpose, not by your action, but by your being, by your very existence. So yeah, just a little something to keep in mind as you're starting this new week. I hope you have a lovely week ahead. We're in the early days of fall here, and I'm talking to you early in the morning. It's like 8:30 a.m. and it is gloomy here. The world has been gray for the past week now, and cold. So if it's the same where you are, I hope you're keeping warm. I hope you're taking care of yourself. I hope you're not going to let this weather or seasonal change stop you from going outside. I'm saying this is a note for self, because I found myself wanting to stay in more and more, which is really never good for my mental health when it starts getting to fall, winter seasons. But whatever the case may be for you, I hope wherever you are safe and you feel loved and that life isn't being too hard on you in this season, but that you're also not being too hard on yourself. Let me know what your thoughts are on everything that I talked about today. And if reading is more your style, you should know that I do write short blog posts based off of every episode. So you can check out my website for that. The link to everything, including the TikTok video that I was referring to at the beginning of this episode, will all be linked in the description, so you can check that out. I always leave the quotes that I use, whatever reading materials I used. If I did some research for the episode, I always leave those in the description notes of the podcast, so check that out. You can check out my website. So let me know what you think in the comment section, and don't forget to follow the podcast and leave a review if you find it helpful. Like I said in the previous episode, the reviews are really what helps the podcast get pushed by the different platforms. I know it can take a couple of minutes, but I would be grateful if you would leave a review and share the podcast if you know anybody else or people in your circle who might find it helpful. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you next week, or in between. If you check my socials, I'm usually talking in between the podcast episodes. All right, bye.